Recording in progress. Gary Derenfeld here. And recording in progress. Thanks, Zoom. So this is kind of interesting. I get this text message out of the blue from this woman, Amanda. I'm looking at my notes. What the heck's her name? I don't know her. She follows me on Facebook. Amanda's a social work student. And as part of an assignment, she had to speak with a couple of social workers and ask a particular question. I thought, with her permission, record it, post it to social media, and maybe it's of interest to other people. So isn't this cool, Amanda?
Yeah, I really like the whole Zoom idea. It's such a great way to connect from being so far away, because if I'm correct, you're closer to, are you closer to Hamilton or closer to Toronto for you?
Now closer to Toronto. I used to live in Dundas, Ontario. I'm in Keswick, Ontario, which is an hour north of Toronto now.
Okay. I'm actually located in like Southern Ontario, Fort Erie.
Oh, okay.
And then I go to Waterloo. So I have quite a bit of a distance there, but it's well worth it with the program.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm thrilled to meet another coming up social worker, and the degree to which I can be helpful to you, it's always my pleasure. I better watch how I say this, but I always take these calls. Now I got to be careful that I'm not inundated, but
I appreciate it.
So what's the question? What's the assignment?
Okay, so to start, it's just discussing theoretical bases of your practice. Specifically, what theory or theories guide your practice. So for instance, if you're using solution-focused therapy, that would be one theory in practice, right?
Okay. You know, you're asking a simple question that actually has a complex response.
Yes.
Overall, I'm trained as a social worker at the master's level. And typically through our training, we subscribed broadly to something called systemic theory.
Yes.
And, you know, the quickest way to understand systemic theory is to think of a spider's web. You pull on any strand of a spider's web and it has reverberations throughout the entire web. So, you know, a parent comes to you with a child-related problem, but the child won't come to you. No problem. If I work with the parents, that will reverberate to the child. Maybe there is an issue with the parents and I am seeing the child. Maybe I teach that child how to set boundaries, how to talk with their parents, you know, keeping in mind the systemic perspective. So pulling on this part of the strand also has reverberations there. So broadly speaking, systemic thinking. Now, having said that, then it's, what's your damn training? Like, what styles of therapy have you been trained in? I'm, you know, look at the hair. I'm an old dog. So I come from the days of structural family therapy, which was an approach to family therapy that looked at the structure. And folks, it's from the 70s. So of course, there's going to be socio-political bias of the time. And from a systemic therapy, from a structural family therapy perspective, the hierarchy at the time had the parents, but let me tell you, it was gender-based. Dad, then mom.
Of course.
Okay. Now, to practice from a structural perspective, we still see the parents, but we want to be mindful of the gender issues. And what we weren't mindful of back in the day was also the racial issues. Okay, so understanding this person in a racial context in the larger social world, and also a gender context. So I was trained and grew up in an area where that stuff wasn't touched. So I start with structural. I wind up at a children's mental health, or I start with structural. Then I'm trained more specifically in strategic family therapy. So we're still thinking of the spider web thing, but we intervene very, very differently. Then I'm working at a children's mental health center, and I'm doing what I think is a great strategic family therapy interview and intervention. And I'm getting in heck from my supervisor because I didn't realize it. They all think structurally, and how we conduct ourselves, the questions we ask, the interventions we use are so different. So my behavior didn't make sense to the people supervising me. And we actually had to sort that out. So I learned strategic, then I learned structural. Then, you know, welcome to the 80s and expanding mindset. I learned feminist approaches to family therapy. Son of a gun. That's a long time ago. That's, you know, yeah. Right. And then, you know, come the 90s and into the double knots, being more aware of race, having to understand the racial implications of society and impact on behavior. So I'm going round and around here. That simple question has long legs. Then on top of that, you know, I work with a lot of people involved in the family court system, family law. So it's not just what are the theories we hold in our head. We also have to be trained and gain knowledge and experience and practice in understanding different systems, such as the family law system. We have to understand and be trained in mental illness, not mental health, mental illness. What is a mental illness? What is a personality disorder? What is a major depression? If we're going to work in mental health, mental illness. So, you know, this is the benefit of being 40 years in practice. You accumulate theories over time. And I've also been trained in what we call psychodynamic approaches to counseling. So what is the structures people hold in their head about their families and what we call parental interjects? I hear my mother's voice. Well, yeah, that's a parental introject. So I love the question, but it is so more complex than what you realize. I've waxed poetically on all of this. Am I making sense?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny because now we're learning about generalist eclectic theory, which is a generalist social worker that takes from all different sources and uses them in different ways to kind of fit more toward the individual and the family rather than themselves.
So let me jump in with that, because we all have biases. Yeah. I have mine. I have a bias against the word eclectic. In my practice, in my experience, and I got to be careful, I'm going to be judgmental here, but in my experience, those folks who have labeled themselves eclectic haven't been able to articulate any one particular theory. And that's troublesome to me. I think you do have to be grounded in several theories so that you can have this broader perspective, because not every approach is suited to every person and situation. So if you're going to be eclectic, let it be on the basis of learning a multitude of different approaches.
That is the goal, is to take in all of the approaches, not just to specialize in one and ignore it, but to take in every approach that you can and use what's best for the individual instead of everything together, right?
Good.
So thank you so much.
Yeah,
that answers every question.
Just to add, I've also had extensive training in behavioral therapy.
Yes.
And behavioral therapy is so antithetical, so different from systemic thinking and from systemic approaches to therapy. So we, the social worker, we are the integrator of all of our learning. And I just want to leave whoever's going to look at this, our video, I want to leave them appreciating that learning is lifelong. I haven't stopped personally. I don't think we can stop. And the broader our experience, the broader our learning, the more models we take in, the better we are able to attune ourselves to the needs of the persons we serve. And that's why we do it.
I agree. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I really do appreciate it.
Amanda, my absolute pleasure.